The restaurant glowed with a soft golden light. Cutlery clinked. Laughter murmured. The smell of garlic butter and warm bread filled the air. It was just another weekday lunch at the Silver Fork, a high-end restaurant in downtown Chicago, the kind of place where expensive suits came with louder voices and servers were trained to smile, even when it hurt. But for Emily Carter, today didn't feel like just another day. It felt like a test she had already failed too many times. She adjusted her black apron, brushed her trembling hands against it, and whispered a prayer under her breath. Then she picked up a tray of drinks and walked toward a corner table that would soon change her life, and the life of the man sitting there. If you believe that kindness, courage, and second chances can change even the hardest hearts, then stick with this story, because what happened next will remind you what true strength really looks like. Emily had been working double shifts for months. Her mother's hospital bills had grown taller than the skyscrapers outside, and her younger brother's school fees were due again. Sleep was a luxury she couldn't afford, but still, she came in every day tired, yes, but never defeated. She had a quiet dignity about her, the kind that people who fought real battles carry without saying a word. That afternoon, a group of men in tailored suits entered the restaurant. Their confidence filled the air before they even sat down. Among them was Richard Hale, a billionaire real estate mogul whose name could open doors and close futures. He was the kind of man who didn't walk into a room, he owned it. His voice carried authority. His watch glimmered louder than the jazz music. He smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. Emily noticed him only because it was her job to serve him. She approached their table with steady hands and polite grace. The men barely looked at her. Just another waitress in a sea of uniforms. As she placed the drinks down, Richard leaned toward his friends and started speaking in French, confident that nobody around could understand. His tone was mocking, casual, cruel. He joked about the way her hands shook. He said poor people tried so hard to look graceful, but it only made them look clumsy. The table erupted in laughter. Sharp, arrogant laughter. The sound cut through Emily like glass. She froze for half a second. Her face stayed calm, but inside, something broke, and something else lit up, because what Richard didn't know was that Emily understood every word. Before her father passed away, she had been studying languages at a community college. She dreamed of becoming a translator, maybe working for the United Nations one day. But after he died, life had other plans. She dropped out and started waiting tables. Her dreams were packed away like old books, dusty, but not forgotten. She took a slow breath, placed the last glass gently on the table and looked up. Then, in flawless French, she replied. Her voice didn't shake. Her tone didn't beg. It was calm, clear, and sharp enough to slice through the room's noise. She told Richard that respect has nothing to do with money, and grace has nothing to do with wealth. She reminded him that the language he used to insult others was one she had once studied out of love, not for pride, but for connection. Silence fell. The men who had laughed suddenly found their plates fascinating. The air felt heavy, embarrassed. And for the first time, Richard Hale, the man who could buy anything, looked completely lost. Emily didn't linger. She didn't wait for approval or applause. She simply smiled, turned, and walked away, carrying her dignity with her. The rest of the lunch passed in uncomfortable quiet. The men barely spoke. Even the jazz in the background seemed softer. When it was time for the check, Richard asked for the manager. Everyone assumed the worst. Some of the servers exchanged worried glances. Emily's heart sank. She'd seen this story before. The powerful man who couldn't handle being challenged. She braced herself to be fired. But when she walked over, something unexpected happened. Richard stood up, and then he apologized. First in French, then in English. The restaurant went still. Even the chef peeked from the kitchen. He admitted that he had been rude, that he'd let his ego speak louder than his heart. He said her words had reminded him of someone he used to be, someone humble before the money and headlines made him forget. Then, quietly, he placed a thick envelope on the counter beside the bill and walked out. No cameras, no theatrics, just silence. Emily didn't open the envelope right away. When she finally did, she found an enormous tip and a note. It said, "You reminded me that real class has nothing to do with the suit you wear, but the way you treat others. Thank you." She stood in the kitchen for a long moment, clutching the note, her eyes stinging. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a servant, not as a burden, but as a person. Weeks passed. Life moved on. But that wasn't the end. One chilly morning, Emily arrived at the restaurant to find a letter waiting for her. It was written on heavy paper, sealed with a gold crest. The sender? Richard Hale. Inside, he thanked her again for that moment, the one that had stripped him of arrogance and reminded him of humility. He confessed that he hadn't always been rich. He, too, had grown up with nothing, working odd jobs to help his mother. But somewhere along the way, he'd buried that boy under success and pride. He told her that her courage had reignited something inside him, a small, forgotten kindness. Enclosed with the letter was a sponsorship offer, a scholarship in Emily's name. It would fund education for low-income students who had dropped out due to hardship. He wanted her to be the first recipient. Emily cried as she read it. Her honesty, the few seconds she had chosen to speak instead of stay silent, had changed more than just her life. It had softened a man who thought he had nothing left to learn. She accepted the scholarship. She went back to school. And years later, she graduated as a professional translator, the dream she once thought she had buried for good. At her first university seminar, Emily stood behind a wooden podium, facing a room full of young faces. Her heart raced, but her smile was steady. She told them the story, not of humiliation, but of courage. She said, "Kindness is not weakness, the strength wrapped in gentleness. Sometimes you don't need to raise your voice to change a heart. You just need to stand firm and speak the truth with grace." The students applauded. Some even cried. That night, as she walked home, the city lights shimmered against the glass buildings. She thought of the girl she used to be, exhausted, invisible, afraid to speak, and she whispered a quiet thank you to herself for not staying silent that day. Back at the Silver Fork, a new waitress cleaned up the same corner table, unaware of the story that had unfolded there years ago. And in a penthouse across town, Richard Hale sat by his window, looking at the framed letter on his desk, the one with Emily's name on it, and smiled softly. Money had given him everything, but one waitress's courage had given him something greater, his humanity. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to Tales Binanya, because stories like this remind us that one act of courage can ripple farther than we ever imagined. And before you scroll away, tell me in the comments, if you were in Emily's place, would you have stayed silent? Or would you have spoken your truth, like she did? Because sometimes, a few honest words can change an entire